on special needs planning. Who's going to care when we're not here? I know that's kind of a big thing for all of us families as we try to figure that out for our loved ones, and it's big and it's scary. But Nick has a lot of the answers. I was fortunate enough to take the workshops that she did, and so did Sean when I couldn't be there, especially that she did for City of Surprise Adaptive Rec. And so I reached out to her again and said, will you come do the overview for us? And she said, absolutely. And she's also going to be at our job and transition fair next Tuesday. So you can get some extra time with her at that as well. And I'm going to let Nick take over and finish her introduction.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do my best. I am working off two screens. So to see you guys, I have to look up and then I see me and I'm not looking at the screen. So I do apologize if it looks a little bit wonky. But I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing my screen. I want to be able to share as much information as I can. It will be overwhelming. I apologize, but as Sarah said, I will be there next Tuesday and I'm always available to answer some questions. I also am going to drop my contact information in the group chat. So if anybody wants to cover that, it'll also be on one of the slides when I present, but just so that that gets out of the way. So in order to get started, let's see if I can do this again. What do you see?
We see your presentation and no
No
notes.
notes. Yay.
And we see you.
Yay. Just gonna do this real quick. Okay. Still the same?
Yes.
All right, wonderful.
Wait,
Okay,
nope. Nope. It actually popped up with your notes now.
better?
Yes.
Okay. All right, better?
It's still just your title screen.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, great.
Okay.
So I'm gonna skip my kind of like dramatic hook you in introduction for sake of time. But I do just want to let you know that my name is Nick. I am originally from Southern California and came here in 2003. I got the opportunity to play softball at Grand Canyon University. Got my degree in education. I taught special education for quite a number of years before my oldest was born. I also was a coach for athletes, but also was a trainer for coaches within Special Olympics Arizona. And then I do a lot of church ministry within our special needs program there. My daughters, long story short, my daughters road to diagnoses was really, really, really hard. It was tough. It was hard. It was emotional, like many parents, most parents can relate to. During that time, I came across another special needs planning workshop like this one. And I realized that, man, I've been in this community for the last 15 years, and I'm just coming across information that I didn't even know I needed to know. And it kind of became a mission of mine to just educate the masses and be able to just share things that I've learned along the way, as well as help families along the way too, should they choose to want to put together something. So, um, now using your, I know a lot of you don't have your cameras on, and that's fine. I think you can still like raise your hand and stuff or put a heart or whatever, something so that I can see. Is there anybody here that has already done some special needs planning? In terms of, I should say, let me be a little bit more specific. Anybody here that's done any of your estate planning? So your will, your trust? No, some. And then if you have you done a special needs trust? Now, there are a bunch of different options, and that's kind of what I want to talk through tonight. The idea of estate planning is like building that legacy for your family, creating that legacy, putting something together so that you know that your loved ones are protected, your assets are protected. But when it comes to having and raising a loved one with special needs, there are a lot more intricacies that come with that in order to make sure that they're prepared to eventually become eligible and stay eligible for government benefits. As a whole, what makes me a little bit different as a special needs planner and what we talked through today is I'm not just going to talk about the legal documents, I will, but it's a lot more than that. It's a comprehensive plan talking about guardianship, government benefits, the actual documents, and then also lifestyle planning. What does it look like? How do we set the next person up for success in caring for our loved one? Throughout the night, I'll use my daughters a lot within my storytelling. My oldest in green is Belle. My youngest is Annie. And my oldest is the one that has some myriad of diagnoses herself. And she's the reason that I am here and just excited to share with you all. So I said I wasn't going to take a long time, and I feel like I did, so I apologize. So our objectives for tonight, my hope is that you guys are going to understand present and future planning issues, that I'm going to be able to provide you with some information, resources, and tools, and that you'll kind of feel like we're on our way to assisting you in overcoming obstacles that come up when creating a plan. My goal is that you understand that it is, I don't want to say that it's simple. I do say right there that the process is simple. My goal is that I help make it simpler for you, and show you that it can be done in a reasonable time frame. Sarah, can you watch the chat and any like hands raised and just interject if at any point? I'm going to try to run through as much as possible, but I don't want to miss anything either. So without being too melodramatic, you all are many of you are at home, but let's say that we were in person, or let's say that you chose to go out to dinner, or let's say that you have to go pick up somebody from a practice or an activity, and what would happen if you didn't make it home? Who are going to be the first people to be contacted? Will they know what to do? Do you have a will or a special needs trust? Do they know where that's kept? Do they know what to do next? Do they know how to take care of your loved one? Do you have a directive letter with all of that necessary information ready for them? And let's say that you are ahead of the game and you have kind of created things here and there. Have you shared it with anybody? Does anybody even know that you're hoping and wanting them to be your guardian of your child? So the idea is, who's going to provide care when you are no longer there? And I know that this is a topic that parents don't love talking about. Um, Vulnerable moment. This is hard for me too, because at the end of the day, there's nobody that is going to be able to care for my daughter like I do. Nobody. And so thinking about that, it's hard. A lot of parents don't want to, but also at the end of the day, I cannot imagine being in a situation where, gosh forbid, something does happen and there is nothing set up, and that I allow the state to make plans, even if they're interim plans. I want to be able to have that control. And so that's kind of the importance of creating this plan. Again, the planning issues that we're going to discuss tonight are going to be legal, government benefits. We're going to discuss budget, and then lifestyle. So the idea is that throughout this comprehensive planning, there are essentially 6 steps, 6 quote unquote simple steps that could be utilized in order to safeguard your loved one's care, security, and quality of life. The ultimate goal, though, being that you as a parent have peace of mind at the end of this. So if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I know that I'm talking fast and it's going to be a lot of information. And again, I want to be able to respect your time and leave room for questions, but don't be afraid to interject if needed. Okay, so steps 1 and 2 fall under legal decisions. The first one being legal authority. Most of your loved ones are under the age of 18. Is there anybody here whose child is getting ready to turn 18? Anybody? No? Okay. So I will discuss it just because I want you guys to know what that looks like as your children get closer to the age of 18. So determining legal authority, there are multiple options. The idea behind determining legal authority is that as your son or daughter approaches the age of 18, 17 and a half, if you think that guardianship is necessary, you can start that process. But what other things are there as your son or daughter reaches 18? The reality is that once they reach 18, you no longer have any legal determining ability for them. It doesn't matter what their ability level is. It doesn't matter how communicative they are. It doesn't matter. At 18 years old, with nothing else in place, you no longer have that authority. So there are some options, and what do those look like? In the state of Arizona, we recently rolled out the idea of supported decision making. That is a written affidavit that says, for like, let's say for Belle, my daughter, she says, I know that I need a lot of help, in decision making. And so when it comes to decision making, I want to declare that I want these people in my circle to help me, whether it's mom, dad, friends, aunts, uncles. The problem with that is it's not a legal document. There's really nothing holding that. Holding anybody accountable to that. However, the reason that it was passed is because the idea of supported decision making gives our children, those that are able, the ability to feel confident in kind of making their own decisions for themselves or having a lot more say in decision making. I will say though, again, it's not a legal document. So at minimum, for families that want to have their loved one create a team of decision makers around them, the other thing that option to do in tandem is power of attorney. Powers of attorney, soapbox moment, everybody over the age of 18, whether you have special needs or not, should have powers of attorney. The state of Arizona has essentially 5 within a power of attorney document. Those include your durable financial, your overall power of attorney, your medical power of attorney, mental health power of attorney, your living will, what you would like to happen on life support or in your end of days, and then your final disposition is what you would like to happen after you pass. Um, because of new HIPAA laws rolled out about 10 years ago, even your spouse doesn't have a lot of say in getting information from doctors. I'm not saying they won't give it to you, but by law, they should not give it to you. And so everybody should have powers of attorney. And once your child turns 18, that's an option, so that they can still make a lot of their own decisions. But if anything was to happen, they needed help with at the bank or something happened to them and they were in the hospital, that you as a parent would have the opportunity to go in and make decisions on their behalf. Um, I think again that power of attorney and supportive decision making make a great in tandem, are great for individuals that might not need full guardianship, which is the last option. So full guardianship is something that is court appointed, and that allows an individual to legally handle all decision making on behalf of the person with special needs. So that said, if Belle was in need of guardianship, I would be essentially petitioning the court. It is a process that requires proper planning, both the legal document submission. The court will then send out representatives for both yourself and your child. There are some investigations that occur, nothing that's scary, just wanting to make sure, keep the interest of your child at heart. And so they have to do their due diligence as well. But what it does is it allows me as a parent to have complete decision-making control. So Belle would not be able to essentially necessarily sign on the dotted line for something as an adult. She would need a guardian regardless of her age. Court-appointed guardians can be revoked. Let's say that something happens and Belle shows some incredible strides, and I'm like, you know what? I think that we could go down to power of attorney, and I want to give her some more autonomy in her decision making and make her feel that way. Then I can go back to the courts and revoke that, and then just take power of attorney at that time. Part 2 of the legal planning can be done before you need to make the decision about guardianship. And that step 2 is probably one of the most important starting points, and that is drafting proper documents. Those documents should be prepared by a qualified legal document professional. That can be an attorney, a paralegal, a legal document preparer, any of those, and preferably in the case of most of you, somebody that does have the background in special education or special needs planning as a whole, because you want to make sure that they're offering you all of the proper options, which I'm going to go through. So you'll have a little bit of background wherever you go. So the first is your will, right? Everyone says, oh, I have a will, so things are great. What is a will? A will just simply states your wishes for your distribution of assets. It appoints executors of your estate. So what that means is it appoints who is in charge of making sure everything happens the way that it's supposed to happen. And when your children are under the age of 18, it appoints guardianship for them. I think that every parent with a child under the age of 18 at minimum needs to have a will, because you want to be able, my guess is that you would want to be able to have say in who's going to be caring for your son or daughter moving forward if you were no longer here. Um, Wills as a standalone, if that is where all of your assets lie, if your will is the only document that you have that discusses your assets and how you want them distributed, it is going to go through probate, which means all of your assets will go through probate as well. Probate is a process where the courts do have to get involved, gather all of your assets, make sure that they are legally yours, legally accessible, and things like that before they can be distributed to those that you may have left wishes for. Um, One of the biggest problems with that would be, let's say, like a home. Then your home, if your home goes through probate, it kind of gets stuck in this limbo stage of waiting for it to go through the probate process. So it oftentimes will not allow your family to have access to that home until the probate process is done. And the other thing is that probate itself can cost a family anywhere between 12 and 15% of your estate total. So $100,000 home would be nice, but that is going to cost you, just for that home alone to go through probate, is going to cost you between $10,000 and $15,000. It'll cost your survivors that much out of any inheritance that they might have. For many families, what that does is it um, takes the decision making out of their hands, and they're not able to decide if they want to keep the home or not, because just to cover the cost of probate, they end up having to sell the home to pay those bills. So that's a will. Again, for any parent under the age of, with a child under the age of 18, or any parent who is guardian of their child over the age of 18, a will is imperative because you want to be able to name guardian. What can you do to kind of avoid probate? You can open a family trust. A family trust is a title holder of your assets. I kind of think of it as like the cloud. And so the cloud is what's holding the name of your deeds. It might be the name of your bank account. Instead of being like in mine and my husband's name, it's in the name of my trust. And because I'm the grantor and the trustee, I can sign checks, all the things. It's still my money because that trust is under my name and my social security number, as well as my husband's. Um, it is managed by trustees. So if I was to pass, because my husband is there too, then he would just take over managing everything in the trust on his own. And then at the death for my family, at the death of the second spouse, then it would be managed by whomever we designate to be the trustee. The trustee is someone that manages that account. That trustee could be someone that then disperses or distributes money out of that account to your heirs or anybody you're leaving anything to completely. You can choose to keep that money in the family trust and just ask them to live out of it and not give any away. Completely up to families to do and decide how they want to protect that legacy that you guys are working so hard to build. Your family trust and the assets within in them are not made or part of public record, where your will itself, as it goes through probate, is public record. So what a lot of families do is, if you have your will, you actually state in the will that you're not leaving anything for anybody because you have a family trust. And then you work over time to get everything into the family trust or change beneficiaries to the family trust. And then everything is distributed directly from there. And those items don't go through the probate process. Now, a family trust is great for families that only have typical children, but what happens if you have a loved one with special needs, who will probably need access, Altex, DDD, and SSI at the age of 18? Well, as many of you know, most of those, other than DDD, are income-based or asset-based. And so the idea of a special needs trust is those are put together now for your loved one with special needs. So Belle's Special Needs Trust is there. And it's there so that any money that she accumulates, maybe from inheritance from her grandparents, or, you know, we utilize this instead of a 529. And what that does is that special needs trust is going to be for the benefit of your child. Um, but it will have its own EIN number so that it's not directly connected to your child's social security number, which then means that when the time comes that they are applying for SSI, when they are wanting to apply for access on their own because now they're 18, they will not have the assets that put them over or make them ineligible. And again, many people think like, oh, well, my son or daughter is only 11, like we have plenty of time. But what happens if grandma and grandpa leave them money? Or what happens if they are, some type of settlement happens, those kind of things. The idea is we want to make sure that they're ready because there is a look back period. And while there's always a way, there are ways that are more beneficial than others. So in that, I'm going to take a step aside and just go through a couple of the different special needs trust options. The first is a testamentary trust. A testamentary trust is drafted directly within a family trust. It cannot be funded until after the death of both anybody that is the grantor of that initial trust. If you're a single parent, then after your passing. If you're a married couple and you open that together after the passing of both. It is a matter of public record, and if the will itself gets contested or held up in probate, then the funds going into the that testamentary trust will get held up as well. The testamentary trust is often utilized in for children that when parents want to hold money in the trust and create a sub account and say that you're going to hold it there for them until they're 25. Those are testamentary trusts. They're okay, but oftentimes, again, it can delay assets that might be needed to care for your loved one if it's held up in probate. Oftentimes, they can be held up in probate when dealing with an individual with special needs because if they are written even the slightest bit improperly, it could be written so that the testamentary trust, though, belongs to your loved one with special needs instead of being for their benefit. But that is an option. The most common option, the most beneficial option in most cases is a third party special needs trust. That third party special needs trust is assigned an EIN number. It is exclusively for the benefit of your child, and anybody can get that at any time. So let's say that I opened up Belle's trust yesterday. So I signed my documents, I notarized it. My planner went online, went and got an EIN number. So now I have all the information needed to make it that legal document, that binding special third-party special needs trust. Well, now it is available for me as a parent to share with my parents and any aunts and uncles that might be leaving money to Belle and make amendments or codicils to their documents that say, hey, we're not going to leave anything directly to Belle. Instead, we're going to leave it to her special needs trust. I could also go and open up an investment account in the name of the special needs trust. I could open or get a life insurance policy and change the beneficiary to the special needs trust. And that way, that money would be in there to utilize only for Belle, but she will never touch it. Whoever is the trustee will be the one in charge of that. Again, the reason behind this is that I want to make sure that Belle doesn't have a bank account with a bunch of money in it, because in 12, 13, 6 years, when I go and I apply for access on her own and on SSI on her own, I have to make sure that she doesn't have more than $2,400. And so I want to start planning for that now. Now, that doesn't mean that Belle can't work. It doesn't mean that if something was to happen, um, somebody asked me the other day, well, what if, like, when we're getting her SSI and she's still living with me, like, then what? Well, then I'm going to reimburse myself because that money is Belle's. And that right now it's $943. I think it might have just gone up, but that's going to accumulate fast. And if I don't do something with it, she's quickly going to have more than that $2,400. And so, okay, well, what can I do? Because I still want to utilize it for Belle, but it's her money now. Well, there's a couple options. And if I have a third party or third person special needs trust, what I would do is I would pay myself back. There are forms that utilize it. We're keeping our legal paper trail. I would reimburse myself for her care. So now the money came from Belle to me as reimbursement, and then I could choose to do what I want with it. I could choose, because it's my money now, I could choose to pay bills. I could choose to then put it back and gift it back to Belle's special needs trust. There are a lot of options because it is a third person trust. The cool thing about a third person special needs trust is that it's not subject to lawsuits. So let's say that Belle herself was ever, um, a lawsuit was ever brought upon Belle and she was sued. Anything that was in that special needs trust, even though it could only be utilized for Belle and her benefit, people cannot come after that money because it is not quote unquote belong to her. The other thing about a third person trust is there's no payback clause, which I'll talk about in the last type. The last type of trust that I'm going to discuss today, one of the last types, is a special treatment trust. That's also known as a first person trust. Those are trusts that are generally utilized when your loved one does come across a bunch of money that we can't move out legally and we need to open this. So let's say that grandma and grandpa happen to leave her $100,000. Well, now Belle has $100,000 and I want to put it somewhere. I want to put it somewhere that it's only for her benefit and would keep her eligible for benefits for her government benefits in the future. So what makes this different is that she does have money. So this money actually comes directly from Belle. But once it goes into the trust, she cannot touch it anymore. Only the trustee of the trust can. When I talked about being a payback clause, Medicaid payback. So at the end of a special treatment trust or a first person trust, or when we talk about an ABLE account in a minute, at the end of Belle's life, when Belle passes away, anything left in that trust or in that ABLE account will actually first go back to Medicaid to pay them back for the services they provided during Belle's lifetime. For most families, that generally takes up whatever might be left in that trust. A third person special needs trust is not subject to that. So anything that's left in a third person special needs trust at Belle's passing, let's say, if Belle predeceased me, it would come back to me as the grantor. Doesn't matter who put the money in it, but as the grantor and trust who opened the account, that's where that money would go. But then I also, if I predecease Belle, I have the opportunity to write down what's called a remainderment and share who I want that money to go to at Belle's passing. That could be her sister. It could be any children she might have, or nieces and nephews. It could be any of that. So what about additional income? So there are additional trusts and money management options for your family member. Let's say that they do need that assistance, but they also have the opportunity to work a little bit. There are things called, and I won't go deep into detail now, but there are Miller Qualified Trust, which is specifically used for any earned income. There is the ABLE account. The ABLE account allows your loved one to have a bank account that can hold more than $2,000 without interfering with their eligibility. That ABLE account is a Medicaid payback account, but that ABLE account is also often utilized as an investment account. So in addition, any money, it can be their money that goes in it and can be going into investments as well. Okay, that was steps 1 and 2. I'm sorry, I know it's so fast. Step 3 is government benefits. So remember, we're talking about a 6-step plan to protect and safeguard your legacy and your loved ones. So step 3 is government benefits and understanding what those actually are. So there are 3 cash benefits that your loved one can receive. That's going to be SSI, SSDI, and your survivor benefit or retirement. The medical benefits that they can receive are access, and then eventually Medicare. And All-Tex falls under the access umbrella. Let me just Okay, so your SSI, supplemental security income, will probably be the first cash benefit that your loved one receives. SSI is the eligibility for somebody at SSI. They are typically begins at the age of 18. Sometimes children under the age of 18 may be eligible based on like your parents' income and assets. But so generally speaking, it typically begins at the age of 18. The disability that they have has to have a prognosis lasting at least 12 months, and they have to have been diagnosed before 26 years old. That individual must have less than $2,400 of assets in their name and attached to their social security number. They can work, and right now they can earn $1,900 a month. And there are ways to make sure that you receive the entire amount. In 2024, it was $943. Many families weren't receiving the full $943. And simple fixes to that. There are usually that when you are not receiving or when your loved one's not receiving the full benefit, it's usually due to either still child support coming in on their half, or an adoption subsidy that's still coming in, receiving Social Security cash benefits as a survivor benefit if your child is employed and making too much money, or the biggest one that we find is that if Social Security doesn't have it on file, that as a parent, you are charging your child rent. If you are not charging your child rent, then they actually usually take about $350 of that. So the total budget minus $350, because they say, well, you don't need it because they're living for you for free. There's something called a confirmation letter for rent that you submit that states that you are charging your loved one rent, and then therefore you would receive the full amount instead. SSDI is what typically most typical individuals think of when they think of Social Security. So Social Security is for anybody that has been gainfully employed for at least 10 years. They pay into Social Security for at least 40 quarters. And you have to have worked 5 of the previous 10 years in order to be eligible to receive that, just so that you guys are aware. So again, this is typically the disability that like myself or my husband would apply for if something was to have happened to us and we no longer are able to work. But I do have a couple of clients who have had the opportunity to work enough time that they are actually now on SSDI. Even though their diagnosis was as a child, they were able to pick up hours at a job that fit them well, and they've loved it, and they've been there for more than 10 years. And so they now are actually receiving SSDI instead. The cool thing about that is that there aren't the asset limits to SSDI. So there are 1 in 3 events that could affect a parent, which would then result in a change of benefits for your loved one with special needs. So as a parent, if I myself become disabled, if I pass away before the age of 62, or if I am now collecting my retirement Social Security benefit. So those 3 things. With the occurrence of any of those events, my daughter, Belle, let's say she was on Social Security, SSI, in any of those 3 events, she would switch from SSI to receiving what they call a survivor benefit. A survivor benefit, the amount is actually based on what my amount was. So let's say that I am collecting retirement now, okay? And Belle was receiving Social Security, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, but I started receiving my retirement benefit from Social Security. Well, Belle would move off of SSI and instead receive 50% of what I am receiving in value, not 50% of mine, but in addition to what I'm getting, 50% value she would get instead. So if I'm collecting $2,100 per month, let's say, then Belle would transition and she would then collect $1,050. which is more than the $943. Then at the time of my passing, she would collect an additional 25%, and that would for her lifetime. Now, once somebody is on survivor benefit, then after a 25-month waiting period, then they become eligible for Medicare. So we have Medicaid and we have Medicare. The first one that if your loved one qualifies for SSI, they automatically qualify for access on their own. That is our Arizona Medicaid program. That generally covers your medical services, doctor's visits, hospital stays, prescription drugs, mental health services. Now, I can tell you that a loved one with special needs can have both. So when Belle turns 8, right now Belle doesn't qualify for access under me, but we have private insurance. When Belle turns 18, she can qualify for access on her own, but she could also stay on my private insurance. So the private plan is always the primary, access becomes the secondary. And what's kind of cool is that under the new National Healthcare Act, so you may have heard a while ago that once a typical child turns 26, they no longer can be on their parents' insurance. But persons with special needs actually can be covered for their lifetime, as long as their parents are continuing to pay that premium on their private insurance. So just an additional benefit for them. Individuals who receive SSI or survivor benefits, again, automatically qualify for Medicare Part A after a 25-month waiting period. That means that that Medicare, they are eligible for hospital insurance, for inpatient stays, skilled nursing facility care, hospice care, and some home health services. I have a packet of information that I can share with Sarah that just kind of breaks down all of the different government benefits and acronyms and things like that, what they mean, what they provide, and then how somebody or when somebody becomes eligible. So did you know that lifetime cash benefits will likely exceed over $1 million for your loved one? And that's assuming that they start receiving SSI at the age of 18. And let's say they switch to survivor benefits eventually, and they're on something until the age of 80. $1 million. And that's honestly, this part of my presentation was written with my mentor. By my mentor, this specific quote or fact was written by my mentor 20 something years ago. So I can only imagine with inflation and rising costs that that's going to far exceed $1 million if we were to take advantage of that. And so as a parent, wouldn't we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we're protecting our child's ability to receive that? Steps 4 and 5 fall under budget and finance. So step 4 is to determine costs. So a monthly budget is established based on today's needs. So you're going to think about what does it cost to care for my child? What are living arrangements cost, food, transportation, clothing, hobbies? And then what about school and day programs? What about camps they go to? And you're going to think about how much all of this costs. And then by using a reasonable rate of return on that principal, we can calculate how much money is needed to fund the trust potentially, right? So like if something was to happen to me today, and I'm going to look at all the costs that it takes to care for Belle, okay, it takes this much a year. Well, I want to make sure that anything that I leave from my family trust covers her for at least 10 years, or we open an account with investments that's going to grow, because the costs are real and they can be pretty exuberant. At a 3% annual inflation, if it is $100,000 today, that's reduced to just $74,000 in spending power in just 10 years. So if I've saved $100,000 for her 10 years from now, she's only going to be able to spend equivalent to 74,000 of that. So step 4, again, is to determine the cost. And step 5 is to identify, okay, now that I know how much it might cost, I need to figure out how am I going to fund this? Where am I going to put or get money to put into the trust, whether that's immediately, or that's in the future. So you can think of maybe family's gonna leave money, government benefits when she turns 18. Maybe my own pension is left payable on death to her special needs trust. I can open a savings account or an investment account. Again, a life insurance policy, and then legacy and inheritance. I would say when doing the identification of adequate funds, you want to be careful and not taking too much stock on any inheritance you're expecting, whether that's from a grandma and grandpa or you're expecting to leave for your child, because you never know what grandma and grandpa might need and end up using a lot more of their money than they planned on. Or what about for my own personal care when I need it or if something happens to me? Once money goes into that special needs trust, I can't take it out to utilize on me because something happened to me, if that makes sense. So you want to be careful. You can take those numbers into consideration, but just be aware that you don't necessarily want to start funding with those numbers just yet. Again, savings, insurance plans, their own government benefits and reimbursement, and then back into their special needs trust. Those are all ways that we could do it in the here and now. Otherwise, at the end of the day, the reality is I as the parent, I am the one funding it for now because I'm taking care of all of her needs. But I want to make sure that if something was to happen to me, there would be a place that money could be funneled to do that. And then step 6 is lifestyle planning. So lifestyle planning, although not a legal document, is probably one of the most important part um, of a comprehensive special needs plan. Your legal documents you have to have, but in terms of uh, preparedness or value, this is going to be one of the most important. So step 6 is preparing a memorandum of intent. A memorandum of intent, a letter of intent, you can call it a playbook. It's where a family makes space to document what they want for the future of their loved one. So what are your goals, your desires? Do you want them to stay in school? But it's also where we um, put down decisions about, like, where do we want them to live? How do we want them to continue their education, employment, social activities, religious stuff? Um, but I will say it's also for the here and now. So it's who are their current doctors? What kind of meds do they take? What are their favorite um, bedtime routine? How are you going to bathe them? What is their communication style? And nowadays with the influx of technology and things like that, we have the opportunity to be creative in how we document this information. Some families choose to have a binder of just written letters and notes and bullet points. Other families will choose to use videos where they keep videos and they open up a private YouTube account, or they have some type of, it's in a Dropbox somewhere. And as long as people know where to find that information, perhaps you take a video of your loved one in a bathing suit on how to bathe them, or you take some video of how you communicate and different ways that they might communicate that somebody that was coming in and doesn't spend as much time might not know off the top of their hand, or on their own. I utilize the here and now part of this memorandum of intent playbook in my own home weekly. I share this in all my workshops. So tonight I'm not home. The list of meds for Belle and her nighttime routine. Now she is getting older and there's a lot of it that she can do on her own, but it still gets taken down by my husband to make sure that everything is done the way that it should be, and to prepare himself. And that's not to say that he can't do it on his own. But the reality is in our home, I do most of that. I'm home. I'm the one home most nights. And so it's just even a way for him to make sure that he's crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. It also has been wonderful for the ability for Aaron and I to get a little bit of respite. So bringing in somebody for respite, being able to share with them this binder of information, these documents. Sometimes I'll even send a couple of the pages ahead of time if it's a new provider or if it's a new babysitter that's coming in to help. I'll send it ahead of time just to give them a heads up on a couple of Belle's preferences or dislikes or things that might make their night go smoother with her. I went all over that. So don't be afraid to plan. Be afraid if you don't, because that is just giving a lot of individuals, and you are asking, you are allowing the state or anybody else other than yourself to kind of make those plans. The purpose and the results of completing a plan is the idea that it's going to provide lifetime supervision and care that you get to choose, maintain their government benefits, provide supplementary funds to help ensure a comfortable lifestyle, provide a management of funds, provide dignified final arrangements, and at the end of the day, it's to avoid family conflict. You want to have everything set in stone so that once you're gone, things don't become even harder for those left behind because they're fighting and there's conflict. If everything is done and it's done legally and properly, then the hope is that you're able to kind of avoid some of that.
Nick, can you put up the 2 slides ago? There you go, that one.
Yes.
I think that's the one that they wanted. And real quick, can you tell me what was the limit on the ABLE account versus the special needs trust?
So a
Like,
special needs trust does not have a limit. An ABLE account itself, there are annual limits within the ABLE account. You can put up to $17,000 in an ABLE account per year, and an additional $12,000 a year of earned income by your loved one. An ABLE account in the state of Arizona, every state has their own ABLE account. Uh, what's it called? Benchmarks, or and so in terms of like what they cap an ABLE account at and how much they can utilize and things like that. In the state of Arizona, while an ABLE account can hold over $500,000, the magic number is actually $100,000, because $100,000 is in order to keep them eligible for benefits. If they have more than $100,000 in the ABLE account, anything over $100,000 gets counted against them in their asset collection for government eligibility. So if they have $200,000, then it looks like they have $100,000, and then they would no longer be eligible for those benefits.
perfect. I knew there was one of them had a limit. I just couldn't remember
Yes.
which. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna just go to the last one so that again, my information is here. It's also in the chat. I can't figure out how to like look at the chat and look at this before I take it away. I don't know. But what I will say is that this is what I call part one of an educational opportunity for any family. While this workshop is not necessary, it's a great starting point. Like Sarah mentioned, I do plan to be there next Tuesday, but also every family has the opportunity to have a complimentary consultation with me. What that consultation does is it allows me to learn your story, learn a little bit more about your family, and then determine a plan of action for a family and what that looks like. Cost associated with the plan, because everybody asks, it varies for everybody. Where the cost generally takes place is in the document preparing. I personally am a certified legal document preparer if you were to want to get that done. But any certified legal document preparer or attorney or paralegal can help you in this. Again, the biggest concern being that their background is in knowing how trusts and how assets and how inheritances and how legacies can affect your loved one in the future and in what they might need moving forward, if that makes sense. But if anybody is interested in learning more, or even if you just have more questions, you're like, I don't need a consultation because this was a lot. I get it. I know it's a lot. But even if you just want to ask questions, you can email me, call me, text me at any time, and I'm happy. My goal is genuinely for families to feel and to know that I am here to be an ally for you. I know that this journey is hard as a parent of a loved one with special needs. I know that it often feels like we are alone or we are underwater. And there are so many things that as a parent we're trying to tackle and advocate for and make a difference in, that we often put these kind of things on the back burner. When in reality, like, I just want to know this is done and it's taken care of, and that, gosh forbid anything happen, my girls will both be taken care of. And that's kind of the goal, is to be able to walk through it with families, to educate them so that they actually know what's going on. They actually know why certain things are necessary, that they understand how it's going to benefit their loved one, why it's more important now than ever. And so, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you very much for coming and doing this for us, Nick, and I'm really impressed that you got done 3 minutes early.